Everything began with the arrival of rebels who, looking through the lens of British justice, sought to escape from the ship called the Bounty and use it as a refuge. After this escape, the island's inhabitants would witness a series of events dominated by alcoholic rulers and tragic massacres. Polynesians, who no longer exist today, had arrived on this island in the 11th century. They established a settlement and lived there with the animals they brought. The island was rich in valuable obsidian and high-quality provincial resources. The people lived happily on this paradise-like island. They used their minerals to trade with the inhabitants of Angara Island, located 500 kilometers away. Considering the island's remote location, it was one of the most difficult islands to reach in the world. When the first settlers arrived, they were probably as joyful as if they had discovered an oasis. They benefited from the island's meat and milk, extracted and sold minerals, raised animals, and cultivated crops. For around 400 years, they managed to continue living in this prosperous environment. However, after 400 years, the island's minerals began to deplete. It became the only island with which they had trade relations, and conflicts with Mangara started. Poverty gradually took hold, and civil wars began when the first blood was shed. Over time, the Polynesians gradually lost their lives due to both poverty and the impossibility of escape. Eventually, no one remained on the island, and silence fell over the land. Centuries later, in 1787, Britain sent the ship Bounty to the Pacific Ocean to obtain breadfruit trees. Britain had valuable populations of various races in the Caribbean. To feed these communities, they needed familiar and easily obtainable food. The mission of the crew was to obtain breadfruit trees or seeds from the West Indies and cultivate them on the islands where British settlers lived, providing an alternative source of food. The ship sailed across the islands. When they reached Tahiti, the sailors were greeted with unexpected abundance, including the hospitality of local women. The tropical climate was beautiful, and the sailors, who had never experienced such luxury, were amazed. Many were so impressed that they did not want to leave and spent more than 6 months enjoying life on Tahiti. Despite their orders, the men were so content that no one wanted to return to the sea. However, they did not dare to openly rebel at first. Eventually, they could no longer resist the comfort and abundance, and a rebellion broke out. Lieutenant Flatter Christine led the first attack against the ship's captain, Lieutenant William. 18 men who remained loyal to the captain were set adrift in a boat, while the rebels returned to the island. The rebellion had succeeded. Meanwhile, Captain William and the loyal men rowed over 6,500 kilometers across the ocean to reach land, where they began planning their revenge. The rebels returned to Tahiti, their paradise, enjoying pleasant days once again. But Captain William survived and reported the events to the authorities. He set out again to capture the rebels, starting with Tahiti, where the sailors had never wished to return. He captured them one by one and sentenced them to death. Hearing of the captain's return, Christian and the few crew members who had escaped fled, taking with them a small number of male and female slaves. They began searching for a new settlement. They eventually arrived at the previously abandoned island, which had once been a peaceful paradise. By 1790, the situation worsened. 9 European sailors, including Christian, had brought 18 slaves with them, 12 women and 6 men. Of the 12 women, 9 were assigned to the 9 sailors, and the remaining 3 were shared among the 6 men. This rotation system created inequality and tension among the slaves. The situation on the island was already disturbing, and tensions were slowly growing. Pitcairn Island offered many advantages with its fertile soil, fresh water, and idyllic climate. However, alcohol soon became one of the greatest problems for the people living there. One of the crew members, McCoy, learned to make a drink from the sweet roots of a local plant. During this time, Christian, the real leader, decided to withdraw from administrative duties and enjoy island life. McCoy took over the leadership, but soon became addicted to his own brew. As leader, he spent his days drinking and indulging himself with the women on the island. One day, McCoy overindulged and lost control. When a female slave failed to catch fish, he punished her severely by cutting off her ear. Witnessing such cruelty, one of the men, already traumatized by the situation, committed suicide by jumping off a cliff. The leader's behavior continued to cause problems. With only a few women left under his control, he began to target the women assigned to the male slaves. This inequality and mistreatment fueled resentment among the men. Eventually, the male slaves managed to steal rifles and ammunition from the sailors. In just a few hours, they had killed most of the European sailors on the island. Only the women and children were spared. 4 sailors survived, including McCoy, while the rest of the women and children remained unharmed. However, the rebel slaves were not focused on protecting the women. Their goal was to take control of all of them. In response, the female slaves acted during the chaos and killed the local men in their sleep, ensuring their own survival. By this point, only 11 native women and 4 European men remained on the island. Among the surviving men, some were not cruel or violent. While McCoy continued drinking heavily, a man named Quintal reflected on his past, prayed, and read the Bible. However, over time, he began to harass the women on the island. Young and Adams, who had embraced religion, opposed him. Eventually, the rebels executed Quintal. Tragedy continued to strike. McCoy later took his own life, and the religious leader, Yangada, fell ill and died. The island, once seemingly a paradise, had become a grave for dozens of people. Adams became the sole remaining male and assumed leadership. He took 11 women under his care and saw himself as a religious guide, aiming to establish a Christian society on the island. He removed all plants that could produce alcohol. Over the years, he fathered children with the women, and the island's population steadily grew. By 1808, when British royal ships arrived, they encountered a respected, charismatic religious leader and his people. The British were fascinated by the Christian order they observed in the middle of the ocean, though they were also aware of the island's troubled past. As Adams grew old, leadership transitioned to George Nobel, an explorer. After George's death, Joshua Hilder, claiming to have been appointed by the crown, took control. He built a palace and enjoyed life on the island, but was later exposed as a fraud and exiled. Despite this, his charisma and the flow of visitors continued. In the following years, around 1900, a man representing the Seventh-day Adventist branch of Christianity arrived on the island. This movement had similarities to certain sects in Islam. Although he remained a Christian, invoking Jesus and God, his teachings and customs were different. His influence over the people grew quickly, and he assumed a leadership position. One of his first commands was to exterminate all the pigs on the island. The people found this order unusual and unsettling, but they followed their leader and adopted the Adventist faith, which has persisted to this day. Over time, Queen Victoria officially recognized the community, granting the island official status. As the population increased, she sent approximately 150 people to settle on other islands. During the early 1900s, the island became increasingly well known. Excursions were organized by governments and individuals. Officials were appointed by the British government to encourage visitors, and post offices were established with stamps and postcards produced. The island, once known only as Pitcairn, saw changes to its administrative structure. The adjectives Pitcairn were removed, Dusty and Stan were designated as the capital, and the island became part of a group called the Pitcairn Islands. Modern infrastructure was established, including social services, municipalities, clinics, and courts. Despite these developments, the dark history of the island remained a part of its past. By 2004, the population had decreased to approximately 60 people, with around 20 males. 7 of these men were prosecuted for 55 different crimes, including child abuse and rape. Among them were the island's mayor and the criminal judge. A prison was established, and 6 men, including the mayor, were imprisoned. The judge was acquitted. About 5 to 6 years later, the inmates were released, and a new mayor took office. The new mayor, Mike Varr, brother of the acquitted judge, focused particularly on children's rights. However, in 2010, dozens of child pornography files were discovered on his computer, and he was sent to prison. The situation on the island remained disturbing. In 2019, the first female mayor, Charlie, assumed office. According to sources, she was not involved in any criminal activity, but her term ended in 2022. Simon Yanga succeeded her and continues to hold office today. According to the most recent census, the island's population is approximately 50 people. This is a story that is difficult to comment on. The administrators, mayors, and much of the population are influenced by a man who believes himself to be a messiah. Unfortunately, troubling events continue, even today. While researching and writing this, the situation remained shocking. That is the series of events. Hopefully, the people of the island will lead more normal lives in the future. If you ever pass by, I would advise caution. That's all for this week. Stay well until the next video.